Broadcasting from Studio A here at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs. It's time for the Gardening Simplified Show with Stacy Hervella, me, Rick Weist, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson. Well, today it's our Just Do It show. That's right, just do it. Suggestions of things you should do in your garden or landscape. And I guess I'll say right off the top, subscribe to the Gardening Simplified Show podcast and YouTube channel. And thanks for listening to the radio show version of the show. Here's one for you, Stacy. Use mulch and ground cover under trees instead of grass. I was looking at a Purdue University study about how much water a large mature tree pulls out of the ground on a daily basis in summer. Amazing. So trying to grow grass under trees isn't good for the grass, isn't good for the tree, and isn't good for you. It can be frustrating.
And your lawnmower.
And your lawnmower.
Because you got all those surface roots that you're trying to go over, and you're nicking it, and that's not good for the blade. It's a lose-lose situation. I actually had someone asked me the other day what they should do because they had tree roots in a lot of shade, which is already a combination for, difficult to grow grass. But it had a lot of traffic, and I told her to just put in a path of rocks like stepping stones or something like that. It's a tough situation, but yeah, definitely mulch, park-like, or ground cover if you can plant them with the tree roots, because sometimes the tree roots are so surface heavy and so dominant that it's very difficult. But it's a challenging situation. On the bright side, you have a mature tree.
Yeah. So put mulch underneath it. It's healthier for the tree. You don't want to grow grass right up to the trunk, damage it with lawn equipment. There's one. There's a difference in genetics of Proven Winners annuals compared to other, let's say, non-branded annuals grown in flats from seed. There's a big difference. And when I'm working in the greenhouse at this time of the year, I always tell people, Supertunias, Salvias, Verbena, Stacy, just do it because there is a big difference. For me, working in the garden center industry, the typical garden center weekend customer, we like to think that they're thinking about the new cultivars that are out there and the various cultivars that they can choose from. The reality is what's on their mind, and when they verbalize it, is 1, will the deer eat it? 2, how much is it? 3, where's the restroom? Number 4, how late are you open?
It's true. You people are always, I feel like most people are very overwhelmed at the garden center and they just want simple answers.
Correct.
And, I do think, having grown them and grown the knockoffs at times when I couldn't find the Proven Winners that I wanted. And the great example for any garden center who's listening, I couldn't find Vermilion Arcufia anywhere this year.
Yeah.
My favorite Proven Winners plant, far superior to the similar varieties of Cufia that one garden center was selling, just kind of a generic. And I've grown that one for years, and it's not as good as Vermilionaire because it doesn't have the investment in R&D. It's still a good plant, and by all means, grow it. But know that extra cost with the Proven Winners has gone into the R&D to make sure that you have a better experience, that your plants last longer, bloom longer, are lower maintenance. So it really is worth it, and especially if you're not a confident gardener, it's kind of a no-brainer, I feel like.
And you're so right. The R&D behind these plants is what helps assure success in your landscape. Assess the amount of time you're willing to invest in caring for your garden. Choose plants and designs that match your maintenance capabilities. Make sense?
Well, yes, it does, except that your maintenance capabilities largely depend on your plant selection capabilities, because if you're picking the right plants for your area, for your conditions, they're generally pretty low maintenance.
Yep.
Some things like you might say, Rosa Sharon, for example, drops a bunch of flowers, after they're done. And maybe that to you is maintenance. Personally, I just leave them there to dry out and blow away. Don't really lose any sleep over it. But some people, they like to keep a very tidy, area and not have all of those around. So to them, Rosa Sharon might be a high maintenance plant, but it's all in siting it properly and I guess having reasonable expectations of what you think is maintenance, because I'll tell you, I can let a lot of stuff slide in favor of other garden tasks. That's just me.
Yeah, no, it's true. Here's one for you. Just do it. Get to know what the plant's habitat or native habitat is like. Now, I'm not talking about identifying what country or what state or what area of the country a plant comes from. Not the geographical place. I'm talking about the habitat. I have often said this to people trying to grow houseplants indoors. You have the dry air indoors, lack of light. Let's think about where this plant comes from and what it likes. I'll throw a couple of quick examples out there. We've received comments from viewers and listeners about river birch. The tree likes to grow along stream beds or river beds, and you put it out in the middle of a yard, grow grass right up to the base, you may struggle with that plant. Or another example, I remember years ago, let's say early 1990s, in the garden center industry, Fraser fir became a super popular Christmas tree.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Fragrant, needle retention, straight. Only about 3% of the trees being grown, let's say in our state here, Michigan, were Fraser firs. Now, these are trees that, like if you think about the Appalachian Mountains, you think Tennessee, North Carolina, humidity, some fog, moisture, upper levels of the mountains, plenty of rainfall, especially in summer, let's say, and you put that out in the middle of Michigan with a hot summer, it's going to be difficult to grow. Growers had to adjust. Now, Fraser fir, many of them are grown in Michigan for the Christmas tree industry. The point is understanding what the habitat or environment of a plant is in order to better grow it yourself in your yard.
It gives you so much information, and I think this is especially useful if there's a plant that you love and it keeps dying and you keep trying to grow it. Spend that extra time to look where it's from. Not just, again, you could say, okay, Fraser fir is from Tennessee. Well, Tennessee actually has quite a diversity of climate, so you need to know, what is it like where this plant grows native. So it's not so much about, it's native to Tennessee,
Exactly.
Therefore whatever in Michigan. You have to understand the humidity, the temperature extremes, how long the winter lasts, how long the summer lasts. And there's a lot of things that I think you can use your imagination to extrapolate from a little deep dive into that kind of information.
You betcha. Okay, Stacy, just do it. Find ways to make watering easier in your landscape. You're going to have more fun and your plants are going to appreciate it. And for our podcast and radio listeners and for our YouTube viewers, I'm practicing what I preach because you convinced me to get a hose link hose and I did it.
Oh, nice. Well, you know what? I will take that concept one step further and say that whatever your least favorite garden chore to do is, invest in making it easier.
Yeah.
So it is for me watering as well. Fortunately, my husband likes to water, so I'm winning there. But even just having a hose reel made a huge difference because, dealing with hoses is not fun. So, I love weeding, but I still like to save weeding for when it has just rained, so I'm not working so hard at it, Good weather. You don't want to be out there in the blazing sun. Any job you dislike, invest in tools. Think about ways that it can be easier and a little less, punishing feeling.
Sure. Just do it. If you want to have some turf area in your landscape, and that's fine and that's great, raise the deck on the lawnmower. Sharpen the blade, raise the deck, more leaf surface area. If you want to use less inputs, chemicals, that sort of thing, raise the deck as high as you dare go on your turf, and it's going to make a world of difference. Just do it. Be out there gardening in the fall, not just spring.
Yeah, for
Weed control, putting plants in the ground, caring for plants. I think it's so super important. I'm one of these people who thinks the garden center should be as busy in the fall as they are in the spring, but that's not the case. Everybody's watching football.
Well, they're a little busy in the mum section, but outside of the mum section, there's a lot of goodies to be had out there that people are just not even bothering to explore because they don't think it's planting time.
We have so much more coming up for you in segment 4. Just do it. Let me give you this week's Limerick. Things to do, they're legit. I do. I'm no hypocrite. Experience is a cruel teacher, not that I want to feature mistakes I don't want to admit. So come on, just do it. There's nothing really to it. Some plants I have killed, which in turn made me skilled. Embarrassment, I outgrew it.
I like it.
We'll take a quick break. On the other side, we'll find out what Stacy has to say in this week's Plants on Trial here on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show, where we are talking about what you should do. Just do it in the garden. And we have not mentioned that this is a part 1 of 2 show, because next week we're going to be talking just don't do it. Don't
do it.
So
Stacy's favorite phrase.
I mean, I hope it doesn't come across as too negative, but that's like my general one takeaway for gardening when it comes to plant maintenance. Pruning, especially when in doubt, just don't. But we'll get to that.
I got a bunch of them for you.
Oh, all right. I can't wait. Mm-hmm. So next week we're talking just don't do it. But this week we're talking just do it. So we're talking about the things that maybe people hold back on doing in their garden, or they're not sure if it's a good idea, or, there's a lot of trepidation out there.
Yeah. So, for example, as long as we're talking about programming notes, the following week, we're going to talk about deer.
Ooh, I cannot wait. I will try to control my rant.
Yeah. Some people, for example, feed the deer in your neighborhood.
Please don't.
Don't do it.
Do not do it. I see it all the time. It drives me crazy, but what can you do? You would think that they were well fed enough on my garden, but apparently not. In any case, so all of this episode, we're talking about things that you should do. And so when it comes to plants on trial, I mean, of course, the whole notion of plants on trial is that you should plant them if they work for your situation. So how would I pick just one? So instead, I'm going to share a tale of personal experience and some plant suggestions on something that you should just do. And that is plant a hedge.
This will be hedge-educational.
No, you may not need a hedge, in which case, of course, don't plant a hedge. But if you move into a new house or you have things change around your house, which is happening a lot right now with all of the crazy development, you can get maybe a new neighbor to move in who doesn't maintain their home as nicely as the previous one, and you suddenly want to block out that view. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why someone may need a hedge, but this is specifically for people who are moving into new homes, new construction, a new to you home. And that is, if you think that you are going to want a hedge at this house, do it sooner than later. And I am speaking from experience, because when we moved into our house, it was our very first house we've ever purchased, and didn't have a lot of experience. Of course, I had gardening experience, but I just didn't have this kind of like living in one place for a long time experience. And in my neighborhood, a lot of people have fences. So one side of my yard was fenced. My neighbor had put up a fence for his yard. Eventually, on the other side, my neighbors put up a short fence, just enough to keep their dogs in. So not really a privacy fence, but delineates the space between my yard and theirs, and they can keep their dogs in. But the back edge had nothing. And we knew when we moved in that we were going to want something, that, we were going to want some privacy from back there, because it exposes us to actually 3 different neighbors because of the way our block is built. And we didn't do it.
Oh, should have invested in a hedge fund.
No, we did eventually do it, but This is 8 years into living in our house. And by the time you're planting that hedge that you should have planted 8 years prior, you're like, well, gee, if only I had planted the hedge when I knew I was going to need a ding-dang hedge, then I would already have it, and I'd have the privacy that I wanted. A ding-dang hedge. I got that from my colleague, Natalie. That's her,
really?
That's her little, yes, that's her little oath, her little, yeah. And it's a fun one to say.
It's kind of a hedgy statement.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I wish that I would have just realized that this would be such an important part of my yard, and then I would have just done it early on, because the earlier you plant this hedge,
right,
the sooner you're going to be able to get its benefits. Because when you plant a hedge, it's typically shrubs, evergreens or deciduous, and we'll get into some plant selection ideas for hedging. but it takes time for them to grow. And even if you're getting a fast growing hedge, you're still looking at your standard, first you got to get through years 1 through 3, sleep, creep, leap. So the first year, it's just going to kind of not do anything noticeable, just put roots down. Second year, it's going to creep, grow a little tiny bit. By the third year, it's going to start leaping, but you're not really going to get optimum growth rate until probably year 5. And you don't want to spend those 5 years looking at whatever you're trying to screen off.
Sure, it's true. The old Chinese proverb, best time to plant a tree, was 20 years ago. Next best time is today.
Right. So if you haven't already done it, just do it now, like I did. But, it was a real lesson for me because there are a lot of things that looking back, and of course, hindsight's always 20/20, I wish I would have done. Now, of course, the trick when it comes to hedging is what to pick for your hedge plant. And a lot of people automatically, I think, when they think of hedges, they're thinking of evergreens. They're thinking most likely of arborvitae, which, of course, is out of the question for people like you and I with deer. Juniper, which I did end up going with because I wanted an evergreen hedge and I needed something that was deer resistant. But you've got boxwood, you've got hemlock. If you're in a warmer climate, you can plant a bunch of really cool broadleaf evergreen hedges like photinia, camellia, Raphiolepis, Japanese holly, and get kind of the best of both worlds.
Okay.
Flowers and that year-round coverage. Now, that if you want to plant a deciduous hedge, a hedge that's going to lose its foliage, this gives you the opportunity, especially in a colder climate like this, to actually have a flowering hedge. So what I think of when I think of a deciduous hedge, one of the most popular hedging plants of all time, limelight hydrangea. And what a gorgeous hedge it makes. It is truly stunning. Now, of course, the trade-off here is that limelight hydrangea is not going to have any foliage in the winter. But, if you live in a cold climate, that might not be that big of a deal because you're not outside anyway.
And it all goes back to determining what is the purpose of the hedge.
There you go.
Right? And if it's just to create a space for summer when you're out there, deciduous is great.
Yeah.
If you're trying to block out the neighbor next door,
you need that evergreen type of hedge. So, there's a number of options. So I think when you're thinking about how you're going to plant this hedge, you first of all need to think, what is it that I want out of this hedge? Do I want the fabulous limelight flowering hedge that looks amazing in, July and August, but is going to be kind of bare and, maybe a little bit later to leaf out in spring. So you have to consider that spring coverage as well. Or do you want to invest in an evergreen? Now, generally speaking, a lot of evergreens are going to be more slow growing than a lot of deciduous plants. Now, there are certainly some fast growing arborvitae like green giant, which will easily grow like, almost 4 feet a year once it's established. But it really lives up to the giant part of its name. Correct. In that it is taking up, a good 12 to 18 feet at the base. Right. So that is 12 to 18 feet of your yard space that are just being surrendered to this very fast growing evergreen. It's going to be beautiful.
And deer resistant or more deer
Somewhat
resistant.
Deer resistant, yeah. Right. And so that's something you need. You can't just go to the garden center and say, okay, well, here's an arborvitae. It's cheap. It's good for hedging. This is what I'm going to do, because you do need to think about how is this going to impact the overall space in the yard. Once you've chosen your plants, figuring out the spacing is actually very easy. You just look at the width that is on the tag. And if there is a range, I always recommend going with a smaller range for a hedge, especially if you live in a colder climate like this, because they'll be closer together and they're going to have a shorter growing season. So they're not going to grow as much during each year as they would in a warmer climate. If you live in a warmer climate and or want to save a couple bucks, you can go with the larger one, but just be aware that you're going to be waiting a lot longer for it to fill in. And it's not going to turn into a wall. Those higher end estimates of width are actually going to kind of just let the plants just touch. So you won't get that nice dense wall if that's what you're going for. So you take that lower number, you divide it in half. So let's say it's 3 feet, and you take that 1.5 feet that you've divided in half, you space your 2 end shrubs, either end 1.5 feet from the end of the bed, 1.5 feet in from the edges of the bed on each side. Then you've got the middle pieces. You can measure that and see what you're dealing with. Now, I will tell you, I kind of eyeball this part. I've been planting a lot of hedges lately, so I know this because you can't totally stick to the spacing.
I'm doing the math here.
Okay, because it may not, depending on how much space you have, it may not work out evenly. You can't plant half a shrub or a quarter of a shrub.
Right.
So I generally will go with one extra plant, position one in the center, and then I just kind of visually do the rest. I like to plant hedges like I do most plants, odd numbers, because that will give you kind of a more natural, less formal looking hedge. I have a lot more tips on planting hedges, but the main thing you need to know about planting a hedge, if you're thinking about it, just do it. All the information will be in our show notes, along with a link to some Proven Winners Color Choice shrubs that are perfect for hedging no matter where you live. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we'll be opening up the garden mailbag, so please stay tuned. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. While we were on break, Rick came up with a very helpful tip that we wanted to share with you.
I was just going to suggest that if you want a new hedge in your yard, you just go in the backyard and you make it a habit of gardening naked. Eventually, your neighbor will put the hedge up for you.
If they haven't called the police first.
Just a thought.
So there's some wise words from Rick that you can consider if you've been wanting a hedge but don't want to invest the time, energy, or money in doing so. Before we get into the mailbag, in today's theme of Just Do It, I wanted to share a book recommendation.
Okay.
Not something we usually do, but I am really excited about this. So the name may be familiar to you, Douglas Tallamy. He is sort of the leader of the backyard environmentalism movement, where you can actually use your garden and landscape and yard to help conserve nature and wildlife. And his books, Bringing Nature Home and Nature's Best Hope, have been bestsellers and gotten a lot of people into native plant gardening, which is amazing. And he has a new book out, which I thought was perfect for Just Do It. It is called How Can I Help?
Oh.
Saving Nature with Your Yard. And so I love that this is so action-oriented, because he's a wonderful writer, very inspiring, and definitely gives a plan of action in his book. But I mean, a lot of people, it can be hard to get started. Questions and answers about how you can manage your yard and garden to better support wildlife. Cool. And if there is one thing that I would say, just do it, it would be to as you continue to grow your gardening hobby or, change things in your landscape, that you do make choices that are more supportive of wildlife, of insects, of birds, whatever that plant choice may be, whether it's a shrub or a perennial or a tree, that we make choices that are about something beyond ourselves. And it's not a sacrifice, because a lot of those plants are every bit as beautiful as whatever leapt to your mind first.
Yeah, here. I mean, it's exciting when you're working in the garden and hummingbirds are buzzing past you.
Love
you can
it.
hear them, hear the birds singing, bees active on a plant. There's nothing like it.
It's my absolute favorite thing. Man. So just do it. Douglas Tallamy's new book, How Can I Help?
Great suggestion. Linus writes to us, I have a young river birch tree that was planted in 2023. I believe it's not doing well. Lots of empty branches. How would you approach this, or is it too late? And thank you. Well, thank you very much, Linus, for your question.
Yes.
This is timely.
This is very timely. And Linus did send some pictures, so you can check those out on YouTube or in our show notes. And I think we've got a twofold problem here. Number one, and you mentioned river birch in segment one when we're talking about, how it is native to a very different kind of environment than our average front or backyards, especially out here where it's so sandy. I have heard people say, respected horticulturists say, you cannot overwater a river birch. Now, this may be one of the very few plants that is actually true of. But the thing that you need to know about them is they need a ton of water. And I have seen one on my street out here that was installed when they were doing a bunch of street tree planting. And they put those water gators on it. You can zip a couple of them together if you have a multi-stem, because most river birches are multi-stemmed. And I do want to clarify here if people aren't familiar. So a river birch is not that classic white birch that everybody loved and went crazy for in the 70s and 80s. A river birch is much more tolerant of some of the diseases and cultural conditions that make growing paper birches difficult for a lot of us. It is still a native birch.
Look for the botanical. Is it Betula nigra?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And it has peeling bark that as the older it gets, the more peeling it gets. And it has all these layers with different colors and orange and cream. It's a very cool plant. So it's increasingly replacing paper birch because paper birch gets very stressed in residential situations as things have gotten hotter. It's gotten stressed. It gets the bronze birch borer, and if it gets that, that's pretty much the end of it. Whereas river birch is, doesn't have all of these liabilities.
I believe heritage is the cultivar a lot of people use.
One of the Fox Valley is another one that's very, very popular. But this one on my street is looking very much like Linus's in that all the branches are dying because once they took off those tree gators to water it, it just did not get any water and immediately started to suffer because they didn't have any irrigation.
So is my neighbor's. And he planted it right in the middle of the yard. And I told him to water it because it was suffering.
Yeah.
And he put a hose on it and ran a sprinkler under it for days on end, and it recovered.
That's how serious it is. The other thing about Linus's tree, though, and Linus, if a landscape company came and planted this tree for you, I would definitely give them a call because they did not plant this tree properly. So as you can see in the photos that Linus sent, this river birch, the bottom of the three trunks that it has goes right into the ground like a phone pole instead of flaring out gently like a tree ought to. So this tree was also planted way too deeply. And that's really a crucial thing because that area of the buttress, that flared area at the base of the tree, is crucial for gas exchange. So it helps the tree exchange carbon dioxide and oxygen. Very, very key for its survival. So if you did not plant this, I would definitely call the landscape company that planted it and tell them that they planted it too deeply because I'm sure that is contributing to the unhappiness of your tree. If you planted it and you can't do anything about it, then what I would do is just clear away the mulch as much as you can and do your best to try to expose that buttress. So you'll probably be digging down quite a bit. You might encounter some adventitious roots that it has put out into the mulch. Just keep going, take that away. The sooner you can expose that buttress to some good fresh air and get the plant some supplemental water, the sooner you will have a healthy river birch and it will recover. Just needs a little TLC.
Carol writes to us, help, I had a terrible snail infestation last year. It looks even worse now and summer hasn't even begun. I live on a small lake in central New York, Zone 5, now Zone 6B. Snails are decimating everything from ligularia to hostas to my grasses. They even crawl up my wicker patio furniture.
Gross.
Yikes. I picked off 100 morning and night. We have had days and days of rain, so I haven't been able to use slug bait or diatomaceous earth yet, but they weren't that effective last year. Perhaps I'm not applying them correctly. I also read that cocoa shells deter snails, so I've topped my containers with that, but it's very expensive. I try to use applications that won't harm my pollinators. I'm desperate. I found you on YouTube a month ago. I've learned so much. I'm confident you will solve my dilemma. Yes. I want to mention right off the bat to Carol, right off the top. A lot of people struggle with this. You mentioned hostas in your note. First, take a look at the mulch. If you have a lot of mulch under these plants, in some cases, pulling the mulch away from the neck of the plant, let's say they're hostas, will make a world of difference because you got to think about where the snails are hiding out. Cool, wet places. And then Stacy, just real briefly, I'd like to mention that I've had success with roofing shingles.
That's what I was going to say too, yeah.
Yeah, she mentioned diatomaceous earth, but roofing shingles, just strips of roofing shingles, you can get them a similar color to the soil, so they're not ugly and they work.
Yeah, so basically all you have to do is take a roofing shingle. Another thing that works very, very well is like a cedar shake if you have if you live in an area where they put in a lot of cedar shake roofs. So we're talking about, maybe a 12 by 12-ish piece of rough material, whether that's wood. You don't want it to be smooth. You want it to have some crustiness on there that can attract the slugs. You put that down at night, you come out in the morning, you just scrape off all the slugs because they're going to come up under there for shelter. That's what they really, really love. They actually will prefer to spend the day on that over anywhere else. So that will help you kind of get them all in one place rather than pick them off one by one. And you can also, of course, try the tried and true beer trap, which is just to say you take like a tuna can or a small kind of shallow dish like that, bury it even with the soil, put some beer in there. And then, or flour and water can also work because or was it yeast and water? We talked about this on a show recently.
I suggest Carol just drink the beer. Forget the beer.
Well, they only need a little bit. So you put a little bit for the slug, a little bit for yourself.
Oh, and they then crawl in there, lose their car keys, and die happy.
Yes, and they drown in there, and you can also just dump that out. So you can also do both. But I do want to tell you another trick, and it's a little bit too late for this, but I've shared this before. The best time to manage slugs is in late winter.
Great point.
That is when their eggs hatch and the little baby slugs are coming out. And if you can control those baby slugs, they will not be able to get the foothold that they will otherwise. But of course, in upstate New York, I would think that this is probably, we're looking at like late February, not a time, if there's when the snow melts, that is basically when those eggs are going to start to hatch. So it's not the time when people think about doing this kind of thing, so they kind of miss that opportunity. So Carol, put a reminder in your calendar so that next late February, you get some slug bait. Don't have to worry about the pollinators because they won't be around. Nothing's going to be around for another at least 6 weeks or so, except those slugs. And that will help you get the control that makes the population much more manageable later in the season right about now.
Good luck with your slug fest, Carol.
So thank you so much to Linus and Carol for their questions. If you want to reach out to us, you can do that at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. Or if you need an answer to a garden question more quickly, visit provenwinnerscolorchoice.com. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation on what you should just do in the garden. Please stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. Today for Branching News, we continue our talk about just do it. Stacy, just do it. Debatable. I feed my plants in fall. When the leaves are falling off deciduous plants, the roots can absorb, the soil's warm enough, they can absorb nutrients. They get off to a much better start the following spring. I may overfeed, but I like to feed plants in fall. Just do it. Get yourself comfortable clothes for your landscape or your garden, working out there. It makes a world of difference.
Oh, and a hat. Hat is so important. I cannot even tell you, fellow gardeners, if you are not a hat wearer, the future self that will thank you for wearing a hat, because we get a lot of sun exposure. Yep. I mean, I'm super careful about it. I wear sunscreen and a hat and got to slather all up. And yes, I know the dirt sticks to you and that's not fun, but also probably skin cancer isn't very fun. So I'm not going to risk it. So definitely invest in a hat. A hat would be my just do it. And if you think, oh, I don't like a hat, it'll be in my way, just go shopping for a hat and find a hat that you love, and then you'll be excited about wearing it.
That's true. Yeah, and I'm getting better about the sunscreen stuff. I mean, again, when we did the garden nostalgia show, we talked about the fact, I was a teenager in the 70s when we would slather on baby oil and lay out on a lawn. Yeah. I mean, really dumb.
Yeah, well, I was a teenager in the 90s and I did that. So
I asked a friend of mine I work with, she bought a house 3 years ago, and I said, okay, what's something everyone should do in their landscape? She said, take the time to amend your soil, work the soil. I said, what should you not do? She said, don't plant and then said a naughty word, stuff that spreads. Now, I asked Sue this question. She said, grow edibles in your landscape and cut flowers in your landscape. Just do it. I said, well, then what shouldn't you do? And she said, don't plant prickly plants by the driveway or the walkway. So there you have that. You want to do a little speed round?
Yes, so we're going to do a speed round. We're going to do a just do it speed round. So I have a list of various things in the garden, and we are going to, without too much forethought or explanation, though of course a little bit will most likely be necessary, share our thoughts. So the speed round starts dangerous. Now. Rick, what is your just do it pruning tip or task?
Prune right after plants are done flowering. That's the time to prune. So if you have a lilac, don't be afraid to prune, and prune right after they're done blooming.
I think my just do it for pruning is going to be don't hesitate to take out tree branches, especially small young trees that you've recently purchased, to give it the shape and habit that you want. Tree pruning is a little bit different than shrub pruning, but it is better to make your cuts when those branches are smaller and younger than when they get bigger. Not only will the tree heal faster, but you won't need a chainsaw.
Hear, hear.
All right, next one. What's your just do it go-to tree to plant?
Definitely, oh boy, that's a tough one. It's a tie between Juneberry and paperbark maple.
Yeah, Juneberry is a can't miss for sure. That is a great choice. I'm going to go with Juneberry too. Surface Amelanchier.
Okay.
It is like what's the perfect 4-season plant?
It is.
If you don't have deer, because they do eat it. So that's why I have not just done it myself. Just do it shrub to plant.
I've got to say panicled hydrangeas. I can't help it. I can't think of a better shrub, easier to grow shrub in the landscape that is so beautiful.
Mine is going to be, for those who can grow it, it does have a slightly limited heat tolerance range, lemony lace elderberry.
Nice.
That is a plant that I have completely fallen in love with in my garden. It is stunning. What about a perennial? Just do it perennial.
For a just do it perennial, I'm going to say Baptisia.
I won't hold you to this. I mean, I know there's multiple, answers to all of these.
I'm going to say Baptisia. It just is.
Yeah, that's definitely a great choice. This is a tougher one for me because a lot of the plants that I like the most, I don't think other people would like. Like if I said my just do it is to plant Silphium, like we talked about in the big plants episode, I think a lot of people would be like, that thing is way too big and spreads way too much. My just do it, I guess, will then be milkweed.
Nice. Okay, well, if you get two, then I'm going to throw ornamental grasses in.
Oh, yeah, of course. Ornamental grasses make sense. And Baptisia is fabulous. But, I'll give you that the ornamental grasses are going to give you probably a little bit longer of a season of interest than the Baptisia.
Deer resistant, and don't get me started on ornamental grasses. Proceed.
I couldn't believe that Carol's slugs were even eating her grasses. Grasses are not typically something that slugs are a problem on. So that's when I knew that we had to help Carol. If her slug infestation was that bad, I felt like we really needed to throw her a line there. Just do it thing for birds. Task or tip or whatever.
Thing for birds. Boy, I'm going to say anything that is hummingbird related. And for me, again, it's the Rockin' Salvia series, proven winners, Rockin' Salvia, because the hummingbirds, they're covered in hummingbirds in summer.
Yeah, and I love Rockin' Deep Purple. I love that dark purple color. So that's the one I'm growing this year. My just do it for birds in the garden is going to be have a bird bath.
Oh, nice.
It's a simple thing. Now, I will say, for those of you who are buying a bird bath in response to this, a lot of the newer bird baths are not very bird friendly. They are very deep. And so the birds will come and perch on the rim and drink from it, but they are not going to get in there because it is not safe. And I have a deep one like this. And I've tried to fix it with rocks and making it a little shallower. It doesn't work. So I have a beautiful old-fashioned one with a more shallow concrete bowl. Okay. The birds are constantly bathing in it, and it's so much fun to watch.
You know what makes this really hard is that I would say just do it. Have diversity in your landscape.
Oh, that's
it's more entertaining for you. If a problem crops up, it doesn't spread like wildfire. That's what makes this speed round thing tough.
I saw an article the other day where it was like, 5 things a professional landscape designer says you should never do. And it was all like, okay, whatever. And one of them was don't plant too many plant species. And I was like, you want to fight?
Yeah, I'd fight.
Because, yes, you can absolutely have a minimalist landscape with very few plant species. But why? I don't know. What would be the point? It'd be so boring.
You, Carol, and me, we'll get in there and we'll have a slug fest.
So, I couldn't even count how many species I have. I would be very interested to know, but diversity is always a just do it.
I agree.
Diversify. Just do it garden design feature.
Most definitely planting in swaths or drifts, as opposed to just sticking a single plant in the ground. I like swaths or drifts of plants.
Yeah, odd numbers. It couldn't be any easier. And that's the kind of thing that people don't realize is such a good and simple back pocket planting tip. And no, it's not just us trying to get you to buy more plants. It really is the best and easiest way to get a professional look. And if you look at professional landscapes, no matter where you go around the country, that's what they usually do.
It's because if you stick a single plant in the ground, sometimes it can look like it doesn't belong there. But a swath or a drift, it's like, yeah, that's
how nature grows. Yeah, it seeds. And okay, my garden design feature, or just do it, would be, I mean, most of the things I've done, I wouldn't recommend that other people do.
Throw spacing out the door.
There you go. Spacing is a recommendation only. It's it's a departure point for your garden, but also do as I say, not as I do. What is your just do it, all alarms on, pull this weed right now?
I'm going to say it is nutsedge.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm with you on that one. Mm-hmm. When I see nutsedge, I do stop. Other weeds, I'll be like, I can get to that later. When I see nutsedge, I'm like, you're out right now.
Although I helped a lady out the other day where I saw the start of horsetail in her landscape. So I'm going to say nutsedge / horsetail.
Yeah, but you can't pull horsetail.
I know you can't.
And if you are struggling with horsetail in your yard, that's probably an indication that something's going wrong with your sprinkler system or plumbing system or water system, because they only grow in wet soils. So if you have an overly wet soil, you probably will get horsetail, and you will not get rid of it until you make that soil dry and well drained. What is your just do it mowing tip?
Raise the deck on the mower. It makes all the difference in the world. You want to cut back on fertilizer, chemicals, weed controls, all that kind. Raise the deck on the mower. Don't scalp your lawn.
My just do it mowing tip is get an electric lawnmower. Because then you can mow whenever you want, because it's not disruptive. So it's Sunday morning, everybody's still asleep. You got that electric mower, no one will hardly even know you're mowing. You can hold on a conversation. You don't have that annoying pull cord where all your neighbors are laughing at you as you struggle with it.
Good point.
So yeah, that's my just do it. That's all I got.
Really?
Well, I have personal item, but I feel like we already discussed that.
What's that?
Your just do it gardening gear.
Oh yeah.
But I'm firmly in hat camp.
Yeah, the clothes. I mean, I love these pants. These are Columbia lightweight.
They look a little light for gardening, color wise.
Oh, color wise, yes. I'm talking about the type of pant. Yes. I soiled my plants.
All right, so that is our partial list of things that you should just do in the garden without hesitating, without delay, just because they are the right thing to do and they will pay dividends in the long run. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. And we hope you all have a wonderful week ahead.